Umayanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Well, our Dandavat pranams with love and affection to all of the assembled devotees, sincere seekers. We're continuing with our Thursday question and answer meeting. I've just reached London. I had a month with the devotees in Hungary. Now I'm in London and they're busy getting ready for the big festival, which will start next week. Unfortunately, I won't be able to be here, but it's a lovely atmosphere to be in right now. Devotees are arriving. Bhakti Lalita just arrived from Thailand. And Suvasini Didi, who's just joined the room, she's also going to be arriving next week. And I'll unfortunately miss her here, but I'll see her in Ireland. Dandavat Suvasini Didi.
I've done that, yes.
We have a Nazar UA who's entered the waiting room. Does anyone know who that is?
Yeah, I think he's from Ukraine. I think he's probably
No.
he joins with Janardhan Brothers too.
Yes, he joins almost all Zooms. Yeah.
Okay. It's the first time I think he's joining here. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Nazar, is that your name? Hare Krishna, welcome. Dandavat. Okay, well, would anyone like to suggest a topic for our meeting today? Anyone in the room? Otherwise, I do still have a list that I'm working through slowly from some of our friends here in London. So I can go to that. Let's see. So I reached question number 5. And I don't know who asked it. These questions are all given anonymously. Especially in Krishna consciousness, the world we live in, surrounded by māyā, is regarded as detrimental for us and deprives us of bhakti. But many Krishna believers might also say that the world is a happy place because God has made it himself. He took birth on this planet. Is it just a game of perspective? This last part I'm not entirely clear on. A game of perspective, does that mean chance? Does anyone, it's some expression, I think. I don't know if we have anyone British in the room. Yeah. But anyhow, it's a nice question. And I would say, yes, it is a matter of perspective, right? And ultimately everything depends on consciousness, right? Because, ultimately what we are aspiring for, what we are praying for, it is not some particular location. Oh, and Axel, sorry, I didn't greet you yet. Very, very happy you can be with us. What we are aspiring for is not like some position in heaven or to go to Goloka Vrindavan or anything like that. And we're not even praying for liberation. This is something quite revolutionary, actually, within the world of theism. Because normally the conventional idea is we will worship God, we will love God, and naturally when we die, then we will expect to be with God, right? And we will be happy with God and we will enjoy with God in his divine, beautiful abode, right? This is the general idea, which is quite logical. But the conception of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the ideal of Krishna consciousness, is revolutionary in the sense that there is no aspiration for any type of attainment. There's no consideration of that. But the only prayer is that we can have love in our heart. So it's love that is completely free of any conditions. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his Shikshashtakam prayers, he has that beautiful expression, Najanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, Kavitamba, Jagadisha Kamaye, Mama Janmani, Janmanishware, Babatad Bhaktir, Ahaitu Ki Twaye, right? Where he is rejecting every single attainment of this world, right? He says, I'm not interested in wealth. I'm not interested in having followers or popularity, name and fame. I'm also not interested in the pleasures of the senses, sense enjoyment, but my only aspiration is to have pure love for you, right? And he also adds on top of that, Mama Janmani, Janmanishware, birth after birth. So implying there that, I'm not even asking to become freed from the cycle of birth and death. I'm not asking for moksha, which is normally a very standard thing to hope for in religious and spiritual practice. But let me take birth again and again. That's of no consequence to me. But I only want to have love in my heart for you. And so this is, and this is the other thing, right? When one is living within that consciousness of divine love, then everything is beautiful, actually. Then one will transcend the physical environment that they're in. In Brahma Samhita, there's that beautiful verse, Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena Santasa Daiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achincha Guna Sarupam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. And it's describing how the great sadhus, the saints, they are always seeing the beautiful form of Shama Sundar Krishna. How? With these eyes, premanjana, their eyes are anointed with the salve, with the ointment of love. Right? So through the eyes of divine love, they're seeing Krishna's divine presence everywhere. Right? And so everything becomes beautiful. It's actually it's a very profound thing to consider. Through the eyes of love, we see beauty everywhere, right? Through the eyes of love, we see the object of our love in a beautiful way, right? But when we are applying that in our approach towards Krishna, towards God, towards the supreme source, then we will see beauty everywhere, because we're not approaching with love any ordinary person, but we are approaching the supreme Godhead, the supreme divinity, whose energy, whose will is behind everything, right? Our Gurudev, he'd like to tell that very charming story of Lakshmi Devi, right? Lakshmi Devi is the goddess of wealth. And we hear that she, it's said, it's mentioned that all of the devas and the devis, the gods and goddesses, they have their own unique animal carriers, right? Like Lord Shiva has the bull, right? So in the case of Lakshmi Devi, she's associated with an owl, right? She has an animal, she has this owl carrier, somehow, owl companion. And so we hear on one occasion, Lakshmi Devi, she had this necklace, beautiful necklace of pearls. And one day she gave that to this owl, and she said, take this around the world and give it to the most beautiful person that you see, right? And so that owl, she went all over the world searching for the most beautiful person. But she felt that something was a little wrong. The eyes were too big or too small, or the ears are poking out, or whatever it was. Something wasn't quite perfect, And so she searched and searched, and finally she came home disappointed. And she was going to tell Lakshmi Devi, I couldn't find anyone perfectly beautiful. But then when she returned home, she saw her own child, her own baby owl. And she thought, this is such a beautiful being right here. I haven't found anyone more beautiful. And so she gave that pearl necklace to her own child, thinking through the eyes of love that her own child was the most beautiful child in the world. And so it's a very charming story to illustrate this point, right? That through the eyes of love, we will see beauty everywhere. And so when we develop genuine love, for Krishna, for the Lord, then we will naturally see beauty everywhere. And through the purificatory process of our spiritual development practice, we will transcend, our experience of the senses. It is because of our identification with this body, this mind, these senses, that we experience pain, suffering, misery, and so on. Our identification with the ego, all of these things are creating suffering. But there's actually no need for us to experience that. The soul is not affected by any of these things, right? So ultimately, everything comes down to perception and consciousness. And in the highest consciousness, then yes, there's whether you're here, there, heaven or hell, it doesn't matter. It's of no consequence, right? And so this is why we can also say that, this mission of spreading Krishna consciousness, we can think of it as the greatest philanthropic work that there is, right? There are persons who are advocating so many noble causes, no doubt, relatively speaking, within this world. But ultimately, all of these things, addressing famine, disease, and so on, they are dealing with the symptoms. They're not dealing with the real root cause. But so that is what is so important and necessary about this mission of Krishna consciousness and spreading these teachings, because it is trying to remove that misconception of misidentification that is really the root of the suffering that is experienced in this world. And in the scriptures, there's one very nice analogy given of, if you see your friend is having a dream that some tiger is coming to attack them, and they're kicking and shouting in their dream, oh, please save me, don't hurt me. They're running from the tiger. What are you going to do if you see your friends in that condition? Are you going to go bring them a stick and try and rescue them from this imaginary tiger in their dream? No, you're going to just wake them up and say, don't worry, it's just a bad dream, So this is what, coming to spiritual consciousness is about, becoming awakened to our actual condition, becoming awakened to the fact that we don't need to identify with all these limited things of this environment. Of course, having said all of that, it is a natural thing that the more that one develops in Krishna consciousness and the more that divine love develops within one's heart, then there will also be some genuine hankering for a loving relationship with Krishna, right? And ultimately, the Lord, in his desire to have closer association with his devotee, then he will also want to give entrance to such a soul, to his own personal abode, right? It is, that also is a matter of consciousness. And one may also have that type of experience while in this world. But there will also be some desire to have that, direct connection within the Lord's holy abode. So, both sides are there. Let me go back to the question here. Yeah, and it's a tricky thing, because there are some teachings which may be helpful for us at a certain stage of development. But then at a later stage, we'll see, okay, that's level 1 understanding. So like, for example, this person in the question has also mentioned the energy of māyā, the illusory energy, which causes us to identify with our body and so on. At one level of understanding, from one perspective, we may see māyā as the enemy. And that can also be helpful for us at times, right? We draw a clear line You know, we don't want to become under the influence of Maya. We're at war with Maya. You'll hear some expressions like that, right? It's a war against Maya. That can be helpful for us at certain times. But for someone who's at a more evolved level of consciousness, which may not be appropriate for us, at least not all the time, then one will see, you know, Maya Devi, she's actually a perfect devotee of Krishna. You know, she's serving Krishna. You know, she's part of a, you know, quality control program, right? She's there to help souls become stronger in their movement towards Krishna, right? She's there to test souls and challenge them and ultimately help them become stronger and more qualified in devotion, right? So it all comes, you know, it's not that Maya is some independent agent who's out to, who's like, you know, evilly, wickedly trying to thwart the devotees of Krishna, you know, so they can't connect with him. That's not the narrative. You know, she's actually a perfect devotee who's just doing her service. You know, Param Vaishnavi, our Gurudev referred to her like that. You know, she's a great Vaishnava devotee of Krishna. She's just doing her seva, right? And so then, you know, one can appreciate and worship her, you know, as a perfect servant of Krishna from that perspective. So, you know, a lot of these things are it just comes down to our level of understanding and what lesson is appropriate for us, right? Some things may be true, but they're not appropriate for us, you know, at our particular level of advancement. You know, for example, we, you know, at a certain level, nothing is wrong. You know, nothing is everything's perfect. You know, nothing's wrong at a certain level. But for us to imitate such a thing is not helpful. For example, it's mentioned in our scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam, there's one section which is discussing the qualities of different levels of devotees, right? And it's mentioned about the highest level devotee, the Mahabhagavat, right? They're called. They're not seeing any bad anywhere, right? They're just seeing good in everyone. And they're also on such a strong platform of devotion that they cannot be affected by anyone else's negativity or anyone else's you know, low consciousness, because they're so fixed. So they can move and mix with anyone and everyone. They can maintain their own spiritual strength, right? And you know, they're infallible in that sense. So for them, you know, everything is open, everything is free to them, right? But for persons on a lower level, it's more helpful to make some discrimination. Oh, this person is good, this person is bad, right? It's good for me to have this association, it's bad for me to have that association, right? It's better if I don't go to the bar and hang out with these kinds of people because that may bring me down, right? I may even go there with good intentions to try and help these people, but ultimately, you know, I am weak and I may, you know, come under their influence. So it's mentioned, you know, one may also be careful in where and how and to whom they are preaching, because, you know, they have to consider their own weakness, right? And so it's mentioned about the middle class devotee in Srimad Bhagavatam, that they will, there's a very nice verse, it mentions how they position themselves in relation to different persons. They have prema, they have love for the Lord, they have maitri, of friendship with other devotees, they have kripa, they have mercy for persons who are less fortunate than themselves, who have a lower understanding than themselves. They will be merciful. They will try to help them. And then apekka means they will be indifferent to those who are inimical, to those who are anti. Right? So, you know, those who are against Krishna consciousness, against the devotees, we're not going to go run after them and try and save them, you know, like we are such great beings. No, we will be aloof. We will avoid them. That's good for them and good for us, right? We can look at the case of Nityananda Prabhu, right? He is the Lord himself, actually. He's completely infallible. He can run after persons who are violent to the devotees, right? Aggressive, like the case of Jagai and Madai. They were very violent. They were very against, chanting the holy name and the devotees and so on. But Nityananda Prabhu is so powerful that he can run after them and convince them to take the holy name. But we cannot imitate Nityananda Prabhu, right? So this is another thing, right? We have to consider what is appropriate for us. So this person in the question is saying, oh, people say the world is very bad, and the thing is, like, if we see black and white, we can't pretend that we don't see black and white, right? If we are experiencing the relativity of this world, we cannot pretend that we're not, right? And so we have to simply learn how to navigate, right, in a way that is most progressive for ourselves, right? Otherwise, we can go down some very strange and twisted roads, right? We could, as a very extreme example, there have been cases of people who have taken very serious drugs, as an aid to their spiritual development. Oh, this is giving me experience of divine ecstasy, like, well, not exactly. Maybe if you really were on a very exalted, very high level of consciousness, then everything that you take, it will, it doesn't matter. You could digest that and everything will stimulate you in your devotion to Krishna. If you were really on such a high level, but you're not on such a high level, you're living within the relativity of your human experience. You are affected by the energies of this human plane. We cannot pretend otherwise, right? And so we have to, live within, we must live within certain parameters that are helpful for us. We have to make some discrimination between good and bad, and anukul yasya sankalpa pratikulya vivarjana. Invite that into our life, which is favorable for our devotional advancement, and reject that which is unfavorable, right? We have to make some discrimination because that's what's suitable for us at our current stage of realization. But we will also have the awareness that I'm seeing like this and navigating like this because of my level. But at a higher level, I may see in another way. At a higher level, I will see it in a completely different way. So we can have that type of awareness. The devotees, they are fearless. The advanced devotees are fearless because why? Because they don't have any selfish agenda. Everything that they see as ingredients for Krishna's service. They are looking in the face of everything and seeing how it can be beautiful in the service of Krishna. That is their position. There's one very funny story that I remember sometimes. It was one disciple of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, one sannyas disciple, and he would go out on collection, right? It was a huge mission, and there were different groups who had different areas, right? Some would go preaching, some would go for collection, some were involved in management and so on. And so this one sannyasi, he used to go collecting funds for the running of the temple. And there was one gentleman in an office that he visited at one time, and he played a trick on him. And he gave him an address, and he said, go here and the person there will give you money for your cause. And so that sannyasi went there, innocently. But when he went, it turned out it was the home of a prostitute. And she was very surprised that he came there, and he was very surprised also. And he actually ended up becoming very angry. And sometimes when you're you're angry, sometimes or always when you're angry, you lose your sense, right? You lose your intelligence. And so he became very angry and upset about the situation, and he wanted to vent that somewhere. And he unfortunately went to his own guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and he blamed him and vented his anger, saying like, what is this? What is this mission where I even have to go to to a brothel? Like, what is this? Why do I have to do something like this? Is this really what is expected of me, that I'll have to go somewhere like that? And Saraswati Thakur responded to him very strongly, yes. He said, we are not afraid to go anywhere and to face any situation. And in the cause of spreading Krishna consciousness and spreading the holy name, we may have to face all kinds of situations. We're not afraid of that. Right? So this is real Krishna consciousness. There's no good or bad, actually. There's only what is favorable for Krishna consciousness and what is unfavorable. There's no right or wrong, good or bad. But we are trying to connect everything with Krishna and the service of Krishna. This is real vision. There's no fear, and it is simply about connecting, right? No rejection, no renunciation, but rather proper utilization, proper engagement of everything, right? That is the real mood. But the problem is that we ourselves may be a little weak, right? Then we have to protect ourselves, and in some cases, although that higher principle is there, we may not be capable of upholding it, right? And Srila Sridhar Maharaj gives an example, like we may be a nurse or a doctor in a hospital, and there may be a ward of highly diseased and contagious patients, right? But we ourselves, we may be a doctor, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our health is good, right? We may be a very highly qualified doctor that went to the best school and can give the best explanations and has, can understand theory of medicine and treatment at the highest level. But we ourselves may actually be sick people, right? And so we may say, oh, actually, I'm not going to go into that ward of the very diseased and contagious patients because I myself am weak, right? They need to be treated. There's nothing wrong with that. It's okay that they're sick people and they need to be treated, but I'm not the right person, because if I go in there, I may become sick myself, right? And so in the same way, we have to honestly look at ourselves and try to see what is best for our spiritual life. What type of company, what type of activities, what type of situations are supporting my progressive development in Krishna consciousness, and what is not, right? We have to honestly try to see that what am I capable of, what is appropriate for me, right? We have to honestly consider that. So yes, I suppose that's my answer for that question. Does anyone in our group want to add anything to that? And welcome, we had a few more join. I saw Julian join us, and Pawan also joined us. Welcome. Does anyone want to add anything? Suvasini Didi, do you want to add anything to that?
No, Didi, what you said is so beautiful. Everything is so nice, actually. Very, very nice explanation. It just it comes to my mind. There is one verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, which kind of, puts it very nicely. Is for the people who have, that awakened that love for the Lord. It said, "Māyā santushta manasaha sarva sukhamaya dishaha." Wherever they see, in whatever direction they see only, happiness, sukhamaya dishaha, yeah. And they are completely satisfied. They are completely satisfied in Krishna. That's what Guru Maharaj says. Completely satisfied in the Lord. Then So they see everything like that. Yeah, just that one.
Very nice. I was also trying to remember that verse. I'm very glad you mentioned it. Māyā santushta satata sarva sukha māyā.
Sukhamaya dishaha. Dishaha, directions. All directions. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Very nice. Srila Sridhar Maharaj also tells the story. It's mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, where what is it? Chandra, what's his name again? That king? Chitraketu. King Chitraketu. He was a great Vaishnava king. He was a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. And we hear there was an occasion where he was passing in the sky in one of his airplanes, and he saw below there was one gathering of Lord Shiva with his consort Parvati, and there was this assembly of honorable sages. And and Lord Shiva, as we know, he's very eccentric and independent in his behavior, and he was practically naked, and he had his wife in his lap, and in front of all of these sages, right? It's a little bit of an unusual situation, right? Not normally how one would behave in front of sadhus, or monks, and King Chitraketu, he's flying above in his airplane, and he saw this, and he made some type of expression of astonishment, like, my goodness, what is this behavior of Lord Shiva? He didn't mean it in a critical way, actually. He was a saintly person. But so in Lord Shiva, he was not offended. But Parvati, she took it personally. Parvati was upset because she felt that her beloved Lord Shiva was being dishonored, was being disrespected. And so she spoke to Chitraketu and chastised him, telling him he's disrespecting Shiva. And then she actually cursed him to take a hellish birth, which he accepted, and he did actually in his next birth. And so she cursed him in this harsh way, and King Chitraketu very humbly accepted that, and then he went on his way. And Parvati was very surprised at his response, because she thought, I just gave him quite a harsh punishment, but he seemed quite indifferent to it, and he was not disturbed at all. And so she mentioned this to Lord Shiva, like, what is this? How can I understand this? And Lord Shiva explained in this way, and maybe Suvasini remembers that verse. I used to know it, I forgot, but there's this beautiful verse, Narayana Parasarve, saying that the devotees of Lord Vishnu, Lord Narayan, because of their devotion to the Lord, they are not affected by any circumstances of their environment. Whether they're in heaven, whether they're in hell, whether they're on earth, it is all the same to them, because they're so deeply absorbed in their mood of devotion for the Lord. And there's a place where Srila Sridhar Maharaj discusses this, and he says in a very charming way, he says that they are protected by a very special undergarment, right? That of love, right? And so this is like a type of shield, which is protecting them from the environment. And so for King Chitraketu, he's so absorbed in this inner subjective state of divine love that whatever is happening on the objective plane, he has some distance from that. He is not directly being affected by that. So that is another nice pastime to remember in connection with this question. Okay. Well, anyone else want to add anything to that or bring up another question? Okay, Divya, Shari, Didi, anything you want to add?
If I may, first I just want to appreciate the talk you just gave. It was structured and satisfying. Just like Guru Maharaj said that if divine love has touched your heart, he said like Devi Dham is the way he said it, Vrindavan love, the Vrindavan pastime experience. If that's come to you, even as a glimpse that nothing else is tasty to you, you won't have any taste for anything. I think that ties in with what you said there, that love compensates. Guru Maharaj's love compensates. If you have a loveful heart, compensates for everything. But there's a taste. Once there's, I'm speaking not for my own experience, but as Guru Maharaj said like that, you won't find taste in things. It's not that it's like a Brahma Gyan experience where everything is equal and we can look at things coming, everything is from the Lord, but there's so many gradations to the development of consciousness. And we also hear one tape I listened to, he said that Vrindavan Das Thakur had one disciple, and his disciple came to him and said, "Why are you so morose? You're always depressed. Why don't you see that you are Brahma Gyan?" His own disciple was talking to his guru like that. And Vrindavan Das Thakur's, what was his disciple's name?
No, this was Madhavendra Puri's disciple, Ramachandra Puri, I believe.
I'll and you know the story better than me. You can tell that it was really interesting to me.
No, please.
No, he said, "Oh, Brahma, why are you so depressed about things? Just you're Brahma Gyan." And he said, the guru said, "You don't understand me. I don't get Krishna. You're telling me I'm Brahma. Get away from me." And he said, "If I see your face when I die, I'll go to some hellish place." So it seems like these things can go forward and they go back, and it's full of apparent contradictions, because as your consciousness develops, what was true is no longer true, and it's dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I wanted to say. Thank you. But maybe you could tell the story properly.
Yeah, that does bring us into some other waters. It might confuse the issue, but it's a very deep topic. Divi Sharji is referring to this situation with Madhavendra Puri. He's a very great preceptor in our lineage, sometimes considered to be the head of our lineage. And at the end of his life, he expressed this very deep mood of divine love. And not only that, but a mood of separation, right? Vipralamba. And in particular, very profoundly, the mood of Radharani herself entered his heart. And there's this very high verse of separation that we hear in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Yi Dina Dayar Janata He, this verse. And it's expressing this deep mood of separation, said to be spoken by Srimati Radharani herself. And by her grace, it entered the heart of Madhavendra Puri. And in his last days, he was venting this very profound mood of love and separation, vipralamba. But it's a tricky thing, because, and it's an interesting point. It kind of like develops on from what we just talked about, that at a certain stage, as Didi was saying, the rules all change. Right? And because within divine love, there's also the mood of separation, and there is a type of suffering within that, but it cannot be compared with the suffering of this world. It's a curious thing, it's a peculiar thing, and difficult for us to understand. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami gives some explanation, saying that what's that verse? The Baye Visha Dwalo Hoy Bitare Anandamoy Krishna Prem Adbhut Charit. That externally one who is experiencing the pangs of divine love, separation from Krishna, externally it may appear that they're suffering from the poison of a serpent's bite, but internally they are relishing the most intense type of nectar. So it's a type of pain that actually enhances the sweetness, right? Just like when you're experiencing separation from a loved one, internally you're actually feeling some deeper connection, some deeper appreciation for them, appreciating the sweetness of your connection within that separation, something like that. That's a very just giving some idea, dig darshan, pointing in the direction. So it's a tricky thing because it can mirror, these experiences of divine love can mirror human experience in this world, but it's actually on a completely different platform. And so in his last days, we hear Madhavendra Puri was expressing this type of mood. And we hear he had two disciples who were tending to him. And one of them was Ishvara Puri, who was a very great devotee. And he actually went on to be blessed with that role of acting as the initiating guru of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? That's Ishvara Puri. Mahaprabhu accepted initiation from him in Gaya. But then he had another disciple, Ramachandra Puri, who did not understand his guru at all and was rather very offensive. And he could not understand this very fine and elevated type of love that his guru had, and he rather equated it with mundane sentiment and mundane suffering. And he quoted these like generic verses, as Divyasharji was mentioning, this Bhagavad Gita verse, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na Shochati na Kankshati. One who is enlightened in divine spirit and Brahman, they don't experience any sorrow. They're always joyful, always happy in their enlightenment. So this Ramachandra Puri was quoting this verse and criticizing his guru. Why are you like this? You should always be happy. You're supposed to be an enlightened being. So it's also interesting, that, Madhavendra Puri had these two disciples who were, equal on one level to their guru, had the same opportunities, but one of them completely understood and received full blessings of the guru. The other one could not understand anything and rather angered his guru, right? Which is an interesting thing to consider. So yes, this is the thing, right? And the word I think that we're looking for is aprakrita. One key word here, aprakrita, means not mundane, but appearing mundane. This is what is tricky to understand about Krishna Leela and divine relationship with Krishna. It is on the aprakrita level, right? Where everything is appearing in this simple and human-like way, which is, and why, in order to increase, in order to churn the experience of divine love. But it's actually, so it's appearing in this ordinary human-like way, but it's actually on the highest platform. So it is a tricky thing to understand. So that's that. Well, there's maybe one other question I'll pick up from the list here. What is your view? This is number 6. What is your view and understanding on receiving communication and direction via dreams from spiritual masters no longer in the spiritual body? Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he received a question like this, actually. Perhaps a few times, at least once or twice I can think of from hearing the tapes. And he essentially said it may be, it may not be. We cannot be sure. Maybe some genuine connection with Sri Guru, but it may not be. It may be something, it may be some projection of our mental plane, right? Our mental sphere. but it may actually be a genuine divine transmission. We cannot be sure. And so in those cases, right, when we are not sure, then we may look for confirmation from other sources, right? If what Guru is saying in the dream, if it's in consonance with what is said in the scripture, if it rings true in my heart, perhaps some other indication, confirmation may come from the environment, then we may think, oh yes, Guru has blessed me. But I've heard some very funny stories. I heard one story, someone received a very strange instruction in their dream from Guru, and it was in the time of Srila Govinda Maharaj, and they directly asked Srila Govinda Maharaj, and he simply said, no, that is not the case. That is not my instruction. So, we will always try to be a little cautious about what comes from our own, mental system. But in any case, we may not be sure about these things, but we do have so many things we are sure of, right? And especially in this age of technology, we're so fortunate because we have, so many recordings, audio, video. We have so many books which have come from the talks of our gurus. So we can be very sure about those things, and we're blessed because we have so many wonderful Vaishnavas who we can consult with and speak with and take their advice. And so there's no lack, right? There's no lack. It's not that we're living in an, underground bomb shelter, no books, no technology, no association, but we're actually so privileged, we don't want to take that for granted. Okay, well, there are more questions on this list, but maybe we should wait for next week. We just have a few minutes left. Does anyone else want to bring up anything in our group today? What about Ganga Leela? Anything you'd like to share? Any reflections?
Dhanyavad. I don't have anything right this moment. I mean, I'm absorbing, things are churning. Good to see you. Haribol.
That's a very good place to be, absorbing and churning. Living life in Krishna consciousness. That's what we want. Okay, well, the next question, it's a personal question. What was the most difficult period of your life in relation to Krishna consciousness, and how did you overcome it? I suppose the most difficult period was when our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, left this world. That was probably the most difficult time. And this morning we were discussing a little bit actually in our morning program, and how I was there in India, right, for the last few years of Srila Govinda Maharaj's presence in this world. And we always had the feeling that, I mean, for me it was never even a question, oh, one day he's going to leave. We just felt that this was some eternal moment in time, and it was going to continue forever. That was how I always felt. And and now when I look back, it seems kind of odd, it's like I had no sense of time, the future. It was just an eternal now. That was the power of his presence, you could say. So when he left, it was a huge shock. Of course, it was very painful, but it was also just shocking it was a shocking wake up call. Oh, that has to end. That has to come to an end. And so that was very, very difficult. It felt like the world had ended, really. Felt like the world had ended. It was very difficult. And how did I overcome it? I think because at a certain point, I realized that it's not that it was the end, but it was that now things are actually beginning, right? That Srila Govinda Maharaj, he had given us the instructions, he'd given us the lessons, and now it was time for us to actually take the exam. Now it was time for us to actually prove ourselves, right? And another thing is that, while yes, it's true, Srila Govinda Maharaj our Guru did physically leave this world, and yes, it was very painful and is still very painful. At the same time, it is not like an ordinary person who leaves. When a person leaves this world, then there's some heartbreak, right? We feel that we've lost them, we cannot continue our relationship. But with Srila Govinda Maharaj, his spiritual presence is still very strong. It's something very mystical and which cannot really be described unless you've experienced it. I'm sure many of you in the room, even if you did not meet, some of you didn't meet Srila Govinda Maharaj in person, I know that many of you still feel a relationship with him, because that's the power of his divine presence in this world. And so that also, made it, easier to continue. The fact that, we can still feel the relationship, that it's still a living and dynamic relationship. It's not something dead, right? And so it is simply more difficult because, we cannot go and directly ask him questions, but we can pray to him. We can feel, his affection, his care, his support, and from so many indications, signs from the environment, from other practitioners, then we may also hear his voice, right? Our Gurudev, he liked this advertising image that was used. Is it a British? I forget if it's British or American, but it's this, what do you call it? Music company, HMV, right? And this HMV, it actually stands for His Master's Voice. And they used to have this logo of a dog, a little dog standing at a big gramophone. It's like a record company, right? And I think it's still going today in some countries. And so their logo, I think it's an old one. It used to be a dog standing at this big gramophone, and the voice of their master is speaking through that gramophone. So they run to that gramophone, those speakers, British, Ash is saying, okay, thank you. That's why no one in the room seems so familiar. So he's hearing the voice of his master coming through these speakers, and he's recognizing and running to those speakers. And our Gurudev liked that concept, and so he used that to illustrate, right, this idea that we're trying to learn to hear the voice of our divine master, to see how it is coming to us. May come through the voice of others, may come from some sign in the environment, may come from our heart's inspiration. So we're, in the absence of the direct darshan of Guru, we're being forced to work a little harder, to really be more attentive and to really be more careful and serious in our practice, right? And ultimately we want to learn to hear, our master's voice. That is our earnest wish. So yes, it is a living connection. Axel says RCA Records. Okay, maybe they use the same. Okay, well, I'm gonna end on time because I'm actually in the temple room and they're about to start the evening arati. So I'm gonna have to get off in just a minute. Thank you all so much for your association, for blessing me with your company, and wish you all happy and inspired week, Krishna consciousness ahead. And I look forward to next week.
Dandavat pranams, Vishaka. Dandavat pranams, everyone. It's a privilege and an honor to see everyone and be here.
Vishaka Devi Maharaji ki jai.
Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Raj ki jai. All these
Jai.
secrets ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. Haribo. See you all next time.